happen until you want to use the windshield wipers. That's supposed to happen way better than that. Let's fix it. Welcome back to the laboratory. We're working on the Corvette again. Yeah, I know I started on the Epic and I teased you guys. We will get back to it, I promise. It's just that I've been waiting months for parts to come in for this thing, so they finally came in, so let's try and get some stuff fixed. Now, back in the 1960s, I guess the GM engineers thought that electricity was still this newfangled, science-y, untrusted thing. So they decided to do all of the controls on this car with vacuum, because atmospheric pressure is like deadly reliable until it gets into places where you don't want it to be, which is the situation we got. Anyway, this car has got probably literally a mile of vacuum hose on it because they're using vacuum to control everything. The headlights, the wiper door, the heater controls, the AC controls, and probably a bunch of other stuff that I haven't even found yet is running on vacuum on this thing. So we got problems with the headlights, we got problems with the headlight door. We're going to concentrate on just trying to fix those first. And we're not even going to try and check for cracked or split hoses. We're just going to replace all of them. So I bought a kit. I was waiting again forever for that to come in. We're going to replace all the hoses. We've got some new actuators. We've got some that we're going to hope are going to be okay because they're on back order as well if I need those. But anyway. It's winter, it's cold, I'm not going to open the big door there. If I were to run this engine so that we can pull vacuum on the system so I can test things, well, I'm going to die or lose a bunch of brain cells from carbon monoxide poisoning. Yes, I've got those exhaust tubes on the wall there, maybe you can see them back there, but they're not 100%. I've tried that in the past and it still gets really, really bad in the shop here. So for small little actuators, we can use the old-fashioned manual vacuum pump to pull vacuum on it. But for the bigger actuators, some of them are like the size of my head, I could be there all day doing this and my beer is just going to grow longer and you're going to get bored. So to speed things up, we're going to use power tools. So we've got a vacuum pump that we can use for that. Now, granted, the cubic inch displacement of this thing is not the same as the 7 liters of CID we've got there, so that's going to pull a much faster vacuum than this thing, but it's going to pull the same amount of vacuum in the end. It's just going to take longer with this thing. But we can use this to test our system without, again, dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. So we're going to start right at the source, right where the engine supplies the vacuum to the system. There's a filter, there's a check valve, and then it goes to the vacuum reservoir, and then from there things split off and go through actuators and switches and stuff like that. So let's start right at the source. All right, before we get too deep into this, we need to understand how the vacuum system works. So the vacuum hose kit that I bought comes with a schematic and some really, really basic instructions. But if you really want to understand the system, get yourself one of these troubleshooting guides. It's multiple pages, explains how the system works, and then it's full of all kinds of different schematics here and the hose routing. And you'll learn that all of these cars are different. So they changed the system between 68 and 69, and then they changed it again in the middle of 1969, and then they changed it again in 1970. So this car was built in November of 1968, so it's considered an early 69. So there's things that are peculiar to this specific time. I'll point them out when we get there. One of the things has already been changed, so somebody has messed with this thing at some point in the past, or there was something weird going on in the assembly line because it's got one actuator valve in the front, and it should have two. So yeah, somebody might have fixed that at some point in the past, or yeah, maybe somebody was doing something weird at the factory. But anyway, makes it cheaper for us because I've only got one actuator valve there that I have to worry about instead of possibly two bad ones. Okay, so having said that, let's start with the vacuum source here. Okay, so everything starts here from the intake manifold. So we go through a filter here, okay, and then this hose runs out to this check valve here where it also splits the vacuum signal. So this goes into a vacuum reservoir here. I'll show you that in more detail in a minute. Okay, and then this one goes inside the car, and there's switches and valves and stuff inside the car for the control system. So how the system works, maybe I should explain that. So let's start with that. All right, here is the hose routing, and it's kind of a schematic, but technically not a schematic of the vacuum system. Now this is just for the headlight doors and for the wiper door. It's not for the whole car, so there's a whole bunch more vacuum that complicates that car, so much more than what you're seeing here. Now this looks complicated for a few reasons. One is vacuum is used for the actual actuators that open and close the doors. So we've got an actuator here that opens and closes the wiper door. We've got actuators here that open and close the headlight doors. Vacuum is also used as the control system. Okay, so vacuum is controlling the actuators through these relay valves. And the third thing that makes this complicated is the design is such that if the control system fails, it fails safe. So if we have a vacuum leak in the control system and we're still getting vacuum to the actuator system, then we can still open the wiper door, we can still open the headlight doors. So the logic in all of this is to make it fail safe. Okay, so let's see if we can follow along how this works. So this is the vacuum source here starting at the engine. So it goes through the filter, goes through the check valve here, and then it splits. Okay, so this goes to the control system. We've got switches inside the car, and then this one goes and feeds a vacuum reservoir. The vacuum check valve is there so that we can pull vacuum on this side of the system, and if we lose vacuum on this side of the system, for example, like, oh, maybe you're doing some wide open throttle stuff, then we're not losing vacuum from the whole system. So once we pull vacuum, it's supposed to hold vacuum on this side. That's going to be one of the first things we check. Okay, anyway, so this feeds the vacuum reservoir here. Okay, and then we've got an actuator here that opens and closes the wiper door. We've got actuators for the left and right headlight doors, and they're getting vacuum from their relay valves, and the relay valves are getting vacuum from the reservoir. Now, these relay valves here are exactly the same part number. Thank you, Chevy, for at least doing that. Now, here's where it gets a little bit quirky. Early 69 is supposed to have two relay valves for the headlights. Late 69 has one. 1968 has one. 1970 has one. My car has one. It's supposed to have two, but it's actually got one. So I don't know if somebody, again, in the past has been in there and changed it, or if mine was one of the very first cars where they started making the change on the assembly line. The other thing that's quirky is the location of the windshield wiper door relay valve. Mine is hidden here, I'll show you in a minute, about the worst place, most inaccessible place, way deep in the fender on the passenger side. That was a 69 early thing, and then they came to their senses. In 68, they mounted it right here on the firewall. In late 69, they put it back on the firewall. In 70 and everything after that, it was right here on the firewall where it's easily accessible. Mine is in this murderous location, especially with air conditioning. Very, very difficult to even see it, never mind get at it. We're going to hope that that one is okay and I don't have to replace it. Anyway, off on a tangent here. Okay, so let's go back to the vacuum reservoir. So from the reservoir, we've got a hose here that feeds this relay valve. Okay, and then from the reservoir on the other side, we've got a hose that splits here. So this one goes and feeds this other relay valve, and on the other side of the T, it goes and feeds the relay valve for the wiper door actuator. Now, how the control system works here is that when there's vacuum, okay, in the normally closed position, so this is our headlight switch, this is our wiper switch, and then we have a manual override for the headlight doors. This just opens the headlight doors, doesn't turn on the headlights. And then we've got a manual override here for the wiper door, which again, this just opens the wiper door, doesn't turn on the windshield wipers. Then we've got this safety switch in here as well for the wiper door, so that the wipers can park themselves. When you turn the wipers off, it allows the wipers to park themselves before it starts closing the wiper door, because if it didn't wait and started closing the door on the wipers, that would be a bad thing. Anyway, when these switches are all normally closed, vacuum happily passes straight through them. Okay, so vacuum passes through all of this mess, and let's start with the headlight system. It passes through all of this mess, and then it feeds the diaphragms here on both of these relay valves, and it pulls the inside valve in here so that it connects the center, which is the vacuum source, okay, from the reservoir, to this side of the relay valve, which pulls on this side of the headlight door actuator, closing the door. And it does the same thing on the other side. Okay, this is just a mirror image of what's going on here. Okay, so when we have vacuum here, it's pulling that switch so that it's connecting these two hoses, which again feeds this side of the vacuum actuator to close the door. When we turn on the headlights or when we pull the override, that cuts vacuum to this. And there's a spring in these actuators that pushes the valve the other way. So when we lose vacuum here, now it's connecting these two. So our vacuum source here, again, from the reservoir now feeds this side of the actuator, which opens the door. And the same thing happens over here. And the exact same thing happens with our wiper system here. That's our vacuum feed to the middle. Okay, this is our control feed. So when there's vacuum, we're pulling on this diaphragm. We're connecting these two hoses. Okay, so this pulls on the closing side to close the wiper door. When we open the override switch or when we turn on the wiper switch, either one of those cuts the vacuum signal here. The spring pushes the valve the other way, connects these two hoses. Now it pulls on the side of the actuator that opens the door. And again, when we go to close the door, okay, we switch the vacuum the other way, but we've got to go through this first. So when the wipers come down and park, then they click on the switch, and then that allows us to close the door again. So that's how the system is supposed to work. So we're going to start here. We're going to replace this hose. We're going to check that filter to make sure it's not plugged. We're going to replace this check valve because we got a new one. It's cheap. We're going to replace that hose. We're going to replace this hose to the reservoir. Then we're going to cap off everything, and we're going to pull vacuum on the reservoir and see if the reservoir is airtight. Let's, excuse me, very dry in here. So let's get after that. There's one other thing here that is kind of important that I thought I should explain too. It's not part of the vacuum system, so that's why I didn't talk about it before, but this little switch here. Okay, so I've taken off the grill right now so I can chase vacuum hoses here, but the wiper door, when it opens, there's a linkage here. You can see the rod right there that's attached to this thing. So when the wiper door opens, this rod goes this way, and then this little plunger presses that switch. So when the wiper door is fully open, this connects this switch, and then that allows the electric wiper motor to work. Believe it or not, it doesn't have vacuum wipers on it. It's got an electric wiper motor. Yeah, that must have been the new guy at GM that day that decided that. But so this obviously has an adjustment here, and again, you want to make sure that the wiper door is all the way open before this switch is tripped. So you don't have windshield wipers running into the wiper door if it's partially open. So again, it's not part of the vacuum system, but it is an important part of the function of the wiper door system. So I thought I'd point that out too. All right, before I just start madly replacing hoses, I've unpacked everything in the kit, laid it out on the table here, and the instructions actually, give us details on, the length of each hose, where it's supposed to go, what color coordinate, what color code is on the hose. So some of the hoses have like a green stripe on them. They go from the actuator to the relay valves, and these are the hoses that will open doors. Okay, and then we've got red colored hoses here. Again, they go from the relay valves to the actuators, and these are the ones that close the doors. We've got yellow ones here. These supply vacuum. Okay, so this would go from like vacuum reservoir to the relay valve for the headlight doors or the relay valve for the wiper door. And then we've got some white stripe ones. These are control circuits. And then we've got a bunch here that have no color on them at all, which, yeah, we're going to figure out along the way where those ones go. Okay, so starting with this, we're going to go, again, we're going to start right here with the vacuum source at the engine and start with the number one hose, which is a medium size, 4-inch length, which looks to be this one. I keep changing my mind about what we're going to do next. I decided we're going to go back and check on the vacuum reservoir itself to make sure that that is tight. Because if it's not, then everything else is just going to be a waste of time. So it's hard to see, but I've taken the hose off the lower port there and plugged that. And then the upper port here, I've got the T, goes to our vacuum gauge, and we're pulling like a really big vacuum on here. And if you follow the hose, we can turn the vacuum pump off now. Okay, and now we're going to sit here and we're going to watch the vacuum gauge, see if it goes down, and we're going to listen very carefully to hear any possible vacuum leaks. So far, I don't hear anything. That's probably a good sign. We'll give it a few more minutes and we'll watch the gauge and see what happens. So, good news. The vacuum reservoir held vacuum perfectly. So, yeah, we can rule that out as a problem. So I decided, again, because I keep changing my mind what I'm going to do next, instead of starting to replace all the hoses, I'm going to individually check all of the components, all the actuators and the relay valves first, to see if we have any problem ones, because replacing the hose isn't going to fix that problem. And if all of our actuators are good, then we know we just have leaky hoses, and when we replace the hoses, then that should fix that. Anyway, this is a brand new relay valve. I'm just going to do it here on the stool so that you can see the procedure, because trying to get at the one that's in the fender there, it's going to be impossible to video, and the one that's behind the front bumper is going to be very difficult as well. But I'm going to show you the procedure that I'm going to use here, and then I'm going to go and do this on the ones that are in the car. So this is our vacuum source, okay, from the pump. It feeds the center port here. I've got my manual little vacuum pump here that just popped out. That is going to work the diaphragm. So with no vacuum applied to the diaphragm, okay, the spring in here should be pushing the valve down, so it should be connecting the center port and the bottom port. So we're going to pull vacuum on there. I'm going to put my thumb over it, and we're going to wait until the vacuum pulls the full vac, and then I'll shut off the pump, and we'll watch and see if it leaks. Okay, if that holds, then we're going to I'm going to you can tell I've rehearsed this. Then I'm going to apply vacuum to the diaphragm, and it should shift the valve, and then the vacuum source should go to the top port. Again, I'm going to plug that with my thumb, hold maximum value, and turn off the pump and see if it holds. Okay, so let's turn on the pump. Okay, let's start with the bottom port. Okay, so that's a good sign. Turn off the pump. Okay, and that seems to be holding pretty rock solid vacuum. That was me taking my thumb off. Okay, so now we're going to pump up the diaphragm, and that should... Okay, so now it's switched to the top. Okay, and we're going to turn off the vacuum pump. And again, we're going to watch, and it's holding vacuum. Okay, and then we're going to release vacuum from the diaphragm. Okay, and then that sets it back. Okay, so we know that if we have to replace one of the relay valves, that this one, in fact, works properly. So now let's go and check the actual relay valves in the car. Okay, so we found the problem. Well, we found a couple of problems. One is the relay valve behind the front bumper here is mounted in the completely wrong place. So somebody has obviously been in here messing with stuff. And when we put vacuum to it, I'll show you this in a second, but when we put vacuum to it, it's leaking pretty badly out the back here. And probably because somebody mounted this thing upside down, and moisture and stuff gets into the back of the valve here, and that's probably what did it in. So let me just pull this thing with vacuum, and you'll see and you'll hear how bad it's leaking. Okay, so hopefully you can hear that hissing. I can't really get the microphone all the way right down there, but it's leaking out the back here pretty bad. And if you look at the vacuum gauge, it's not pulling much of a vacuum. Now, if I apply vacuum to the diaphragm and plug the other post here, same thing, it's not holding much vacuum at all. Okay, so this valve is absolutely problematic. Okay, so I've mounted one of the new relay valves, and I've actually mounted it in the correct location here. So it's going to be up beside the horn here, okay, and it's mounted with the diaphragm on the top. So, okay, hopefully this is going to be the problem with the headlight doors. Now we're going to go check the wiper door actuator relay valve too. So, good news, the relay valve in the fender checked out perfectly, and that's really, really good news because I did not want to try and replace that thing. It would be like doing laparoscopic surgery from like outside of the body. So next up, we're going to check the actuator here for the windshield wiper door. So we're going to check the opening side. Sorry, this is the closing side, and then we're going to check the opening side. So we've got everything hooked up here. We'll just start our vacuum pump. Okay, pull our vacuum, turn off the pump, and then it looks like it's actually holding vacuum. Oh, we're starting to lose some vacuum here now. Now, this plug here, I suspect, might be the problem. Yeah, it seems like, so we'll just pop that off. Now, why there's a plug on here is if worse comes to worse, you can pop off that plug and you can physically push the diaphragm and open the wiper door mechanically if you had to. Now, this thing is like 56 years old, and yeah, it's gotten really hard. It's probably not sealing up that well anymore. So let's take some of the handyman's secret weapon here. I think you need to be at least 50 years old to get that reference. And hopefully when I put vacuum to this thing, it doesn't suck the tape in. Okay, so again, we're pulling vacuum. Shut it off. And now it's holding rock steady. So yeah, we need to see if we can get a reproduction plug here. Get a new one that's a bit softer and seals up a little bit better, or worst case is we just combine it with some duct tape or some silicone or something to seal that up. But the leak was slow enough that that's not a huge problem. But we're gonna solve it. Okay, now we need to check the other side. So now we've got the diaphragm plumbed up on the other side. So at this point, when I put vacuum to it, the wiper door should open as well. And it is. Okay, and I think I just broke my vacuum gauge. Or we're not holding very good vacuum. Oh yeah, okay, that could be the problem too. Let's try and put this on a little bit better. Okay, try it again. Okay, and we are pulling a vacuum all the way through this diaphragm, which is not good. It's not supposed to do that. So this, in fact, is bad. Okay, so it's interesting that on the closing side it held vacuum perfectly fine, but on the opening side it's got a pretty significant leak through the diaphragm. Maybe it just needs some adjustment here. I'm going to fight with this for a bit off camera and see what I can come up with. Okay, so I went back and I checked and I double checked like both sides of this thing again, and in fact this thing is problematic. It's not as problematic as it could be. I mean, it still opens the wiper doors, it still closes the wiper doors, and it usually holds vacuum on the closing side, which is like the normal condition. Probably not going to be driving this car in the rain much anyway, so I could probably leave this thing on here for a while and it's not going to be the end of the world. It's good news that we found another problem. It's bad news that You can't rebuild these things and buy new ones. They're like $300. So yeah. Anyway, let's go and do the same thing now, checking the headlight actuators, see if those diaphragms are still holding vacuum, see how much more this is going to cost me. All right, really hard to see, but on the closing side of the diaphragms, it's easier to get at them from the bottom side here. So we're going to put some vacuum to the driver's side one here. Okay, actually that was the opening side down here. So it had a hose on there with a red stripe, so somebody plumbed the hoses wrong. Okay, and we can hear like a whole bunch of hissing going on, so I suspect that, yeah, as soon as I take the vacuum off, we lost, as soon as I turn the vacuum pump off, we lost all vacuum. So you can buy new seal kits for this thing, and obviously the seal has seen better days. So I'm going to buy a seal kit, and hopefully we can fix that up. We'll check the passenger side once, see if it's any better, and then we'll drop the car down because we can get at the other side of the diaphragm from the top. So we'll see if the closing side actually holds vacuum, and if it does, then we know the diaphragms are good, and it's just the shaft seal that we've got to worry about. And again, we can get kits to fix that. So let's see how the passenger side goes. All right, we're hooked up on the closing side now, and guess what? It had a green hose on that side. So yeah, somebody's plumbed the hoses backwards on here. I don't know if they screwed that up at the factory, but I suspect that somebody's been in here monkeying with stuff at some point and they put it back together wrong. Anyway, don't pay attention to the absolute values of my vacuum gauge anymore, because I have dropped it so many times today that it's, yeah, I can't be believed anymore. But let's turn on the pump. Okay, that door closes nice and tight. Turn off the pump, and we're holding vacuum pretty good. Okay, so I like that. We'll try the other side and see how it goes. Another thing we want to check is the safety switch for the wiper door. This fits down in here. When the wipers park, it depresses this. It's only got a vacuum source input here to the, these terminals are color coordinated here. So it's got a red and a white. So, well, technically I should be feeding into the white is where the vacuum source goes, and then the red comes out, and that'll allow the door to close when the wipers park. So I'm going to put vacuum to this, and we're going to see if it holds vacuum. In the closed position is when vacuum should flow through this. When this thing is open, when the wipers are activating, then we shouldn't have vacuum going through here. So we'll flip on our vacuum pump. Okay, and we can hear it's obviously leaking through here, and when I plug this, you can see it's actually leaking through the bellows. So yeah, this thing needs to be replaced. All right, the final check that I want to do here before I start replacing hoses. Now I've disconnected the vacuum source here that goes into all of the control circuits inside the car. Okay, and I've taken that hose, here it is, and connected up through our vacuum system. Got our gauge here. Okay, so with all of the switches closed, we should see a vacuum at the control circuit for the wiper door relay valve and for the headlight door relay valve. Okay, now I've intercepted those control hoses. Okay, so here's the one that would, well, it would ordinarily go through our faulty safety switch, but we know that that doesn't work, so I've intercepted it before the safety switch. But this is the control circuit that goes to the wiper relay valve. So I'll plug that off. Okay, we should see a vacuum there. And for the headlight circuit, by the way, golf tees are your friend when you're doing stuff with vacuum hoses. So we've got that plugged off. So now if I fire up the pump, okay, we should be pulling vacuum through the system. And we are, and again, ignore the absolute values on this gauge because I've dropped it like 100 times now already. So we're going to turn the pump off, and we're going to see that we're holding vacuum pretty good. Okay, happy with that. So now we'll turn the pump back on. Okay, and now this is where I'm going to need both hands. So give me a second here to set up our tripod. Okay, with all our switches closed, again, we should be seeing a vacuum here. And we are. Okay, so that's correct. And if we check our headlight, and we're getting a vacuum there too. Okay, so that's good. That's working as it's supposed to. So now, if I pull the headlight switch, the vacuum here should go away. We should still have vacuum on the wiper circuit, but this one, the vacuum should go away. So let me pull that headlight switch. Okay. And sure enough, we have no vacuum here anymore. So that's working correctly. Now, let me turn off the headlight switch and let me pull the vacuum override switch for the headlight doors. Okay, and again, we have no vacuum here, so headlight circuit is working properly. Now, while the headlight circuit has lost vacuum, we should still have vacuum here in the wiper circuit, which we do. Okay, so that's good. That's working properly. So let's close the headlight bypass valve, and let's try the wiper bypass valve. So now we should have vacuum at the front of the engine, front of the car here again, and we do. Trust me, it's off camera, but we do. And now the vacuum here should go away, and it has. Okay, so that's great news. So that whole control circuit is working properly. We know that all of the switches and valves in the car are working properly, and all of those hoses are actually good and intact and not leaking, because I didn't really want to replace all of them, but I might still. We'll see. We'll replace the easier ones, and the hellish ones, we might leave those until the problems come back. So as a minimum, we're going to need a new safety switch, okay, because this one leaks horribly. Ideally, I'd like to get a new actuator for the wiper door, but $360, so might live with this one for a little while longer. We'll order up a new plug for sure. Those are cheap. And the leak that we've got on the opening side is really, really minor. I'm not planning on driving this thing in the rain, so I can live with that, I think, for a while. And once we get all of this stuff, we can plug everything together. Actually, even before we get this thing, we can bypass it and just do a running check to make sure that everything else is good once we got the new hoses in. So let's do that. Let's see how we did. Wiper door is closed. Try the headlights. Wiper door open. Wiper door closed. Nice. So there we go. It works as designed. Hopefully it's going to stay that way for a while. And if not, when the atmosphere finally finds its way back in there somewhere where it's not supposed to be, hopefully that's going to be the next owner's problem and not mine. Anyway, long, boring video. Sorry about that, but we got this project done. This project. There's lots of other projects on this car still to do, but this was a big one, something that I was really dreading to do. So I'm really happy the way it's turned out. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for all the comments and the likes and everything else. Really appreciate all you guys. As usual, be kind, be humble. See you next time. No, that's not good. Yeah, no. And action as soon as I get a voice. Man, winter is tough on my voice. Dry air. Welcome back to the laboratory. Now we're rolling. Single camera, so you can't f it up and edit it to make it look good.